Hello, listeners and watchers. I'm Alaric, and soon you will see and hear my friend Ben. Together we are Sacred Assumptions. This is Session 1, Episode 3, for those following along with this session and want to keep track of where you are in the show.
So now we're getting to your favorite verses, I
Yeah,
guess.
the favorite verses I told Ben earlier that this was going to be my favorite. One of my favorite verses is verse 9 and 10, which is, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possessions, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy." And for me, why I like these verses so much is it's an identity sort of verses right there of what, like, God has given me an identity in him. Like, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, people of his own possession. It's like it gives this sense of I'm desired by God right here, and I am special right there. There's a positioning right there, and for me, when I go through it, I think of this book called the 3D Gospel, where it talks about sin and how sin affects us in three different ways, that our relationship with God, and how the gospel clearly fulfills those needs where we fall short with sin. One is there's the honor shame, there's like guilt, and then there's power. And guilt, there's things about being innocent and guilty, and that's the part where most Western civilization goes, that when we study scripture, that we target that part. Then there's honor and shame, which talks about our identity part, where we are not equal to God for it. And so that's more in Eastern cultures, where it's about our identity of who we are. And then there's like the power, which is fear and power, which is about how we don't have the power to overcome evil, and that evil has a hold over us, and that God is the one that has the power to overcome that evil. And this part, for verses 9 and 10, I say go more into the honor and shame part of sin, which the shame is that we are ashamed because we are sinners, we are apart from God. And this part here is this identity that God bestows upon us of being the chosen race, the royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of his own possession, where we are taken out from that shameful position of sinners, where we're outside of God's reach, and we're not allowed to be with him because of who we are, and because only God is the one that can take us from that position into that part where we're the chosen race, royal priesthood, the holy nation, the people of his own possession, is so impactful for me, is because I can definitely feel like at times I'm not doing too good, but I can remember that God has chosen me, that my identity is not in these things that I do, which I believe define me, or how I define myself, that God has a way of defining me. And so it gives me honor and gets rid of the shame because of what God has done. And then now that I'm in this position, I have this part where you can proclaim excellencies of him who called you out of this part, which is the shame and this sin into his marvelous light, and then we are to proclaim, and our mission is to proclaim it to those who are still in sin. I just gave you a lot.
So did you say that the West deals more with guilty, not guilty?
What? The West with guilty and innocence.
Guilt and innocence. Isn't that essentially honor shame? Just different from a different angle.
So,
because typically, if you're innocent or not guilty, I guess I was thinking not guilty, but innocent, there's honor in that. But if you're guilty, you tend to be more ashamed because you're guilty, and you will fight it or you will argue against it because it's a shameful situation.
there is some, but I say it's deeper than that. So if you are, say you have that part where you're of the court where feel like you're seeing if you're guilty or innocent. So you get accused of a crime, you get acquitted of the crime, which is, or not acquitted, but you are found innocent. You're like, yes, I'm innocent. Like, I don't have this against me. But you go out and you're the janitor. You go back to the slums and you know there are people over there in the, like, who have a palace that is, like, you're not allowed to go into the palace because, like, you're the janitor, you're the beggar and such. That is your identity. And in this part, there's nothing you can do to get yourself out of that position to get into the palace, except for the person in the palace saying you can come in.
Okay.
So
that's about where that makes sense. Before that, I could see, depending on the maybe culture and stuff like that, you being able to work up to better positions. But I could see how the palace would still be unattainable. Oh. That's a birthright. So.
Yeah, I mean,
unless you get married, well, it's still a birthright, but unless you get married into it. But
yeah, that's kind of the thing where probably in capitalist society where we're like, hey, like anything can go, but in other cultures and other ways, you're like, hey, I can't do this. Like you would not. There are, like, in caste systems or people in royalty, you're not marrying into the royal family if you're the peasant. Mm-hmm. Like in the past, that doesn't do it. That doesn't work. Right. And in
there's stories of it.
There's stories of it, but if you see in other, like, cultures, unless you're practically, most of the times there's conflict and such there of, like, the son or the daughter is viewed less because of how they marry somebody lower than them. Mm-hmm. I'd probably say probably for some people, like, if you're a father and you're raising a daughter and you want to raise well, and then you like, hey, she's becoming a lawyer, she's becoming a doctor, and like you're raising her up to be this way, and then say she finds like a musician that's like, I'm just going to tour around the world in a band and a beat up van. The father is probably going to be like, what's going on? Like, what about your career, medicine and law or business? Like, what's all this here? Why are you going around in this beat up van after, like, all this was given to you? Mm-hmm. Why do you want to go for that life right there to go around, practically throw it all away?
That's still a thing here, but
I know, but, that's what I can think of.
right.
If in the West would be the closest thing.
So the difference that what you're saying is that here, we can, all we're dealing with is like, say, innocent or guilty, and so you can possibly escape that depending on the verdict. Whereas in other cultures, you can have that or not have that, but you're still dealing with whether you were just shamed by your situation, by the situation you were born into, honor or shame type of thing in that way.
Yeah, and so that is where you are left to. Like, that's the situation in some parts where, in more modern parts in those societies, of if you can get the education to get that job, you can be raised as the peasant and work hard to get the degree, like the engineering degree, the doctor, the lawyer, and then suddenly be raised out of that position into be like the business, the doctor, and be like, oh, it's a high position. But is that position the king?
Right. And so with this, do you tend to prefer this to be your favorite because it's something that can't be taken away?
It is something that can't be taken away because God bestows it upon you, because you are taken from out there into he's taking you from the streets into the palace to live in the palace.
Okay, so you like it because this is not a thing that's just like another thing that's generally just, it's unrealistic, but he's made it a reality.
Because of
this is what happens in fictional stories, buddy.
This is the part Jesus dies and like rose from the dead. This is the part where breaks it out of where we are in the situation. We are practically the peasants outside the palace, and that's going to be burned up at some point. But God has come down to pull us out into the royal palace right there. I'll probably have to give you the book at some point.
You actually have.
I have?
You have. You gave it to me right before you left for Dallas. Did
you read it?
It's been my bookshelf. I have genuinely had it in the back of my mind at every time you read, but I have not done it yet.
It's a small book.
It is.
It's like 80 pages to 100 pages.
It's definitely like one of the smaller books I have. But yeah.
But for it also gives in verse like I would say in the 9 is right there of like you're out to proclaim the marvelous light. So that's like you're in Gun's royal palace and you have a mission and you're part of God's plan, or in some cases you are part of the royal family. And then 10 is the part where the distinction of once you were not a people, God's people, but now you are God's people. Once you have not received mercy, but now you have received mercy, is the part of the difference right there of like, you did not have this. This is not you, but now this is you.
So when it says that because he explains essentially the purpose, or it gives you a purpose in it. Because he says you're his own possession. It says that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of the darkness to his marvelous light. And when it says proclaimed the excellencies of him, what do you think that that's referring to?
I think that is evangelism.
So I guess the next question is, do you think that is just evangelism? I mean, evangelism is a big thing, but do you think that it's more than just that it is strictly referring to what Jesus did?
So the part where you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of the darkness?
Yeah.
So for it, that is the task assigned, is to evangelize, but there's also the difference of who you also are with being his chosen race, his royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of his own possession. There is another part right there of like, hey, like you are also worshiping God and desired right there. And so it's like, it's an intertwining of like, this is all of who you are, and because of who you are and what you're doing it because of who you are also, and part of that is proclaiming Jesus to those who are in the darkness.
So part of my thinking with it is that when it says proclaiming his excellencies, when it says excellencies, I think part of that has to do with his attributes. Here's what God is like. This is how excellent or astonishing he is. And with that, we also have the whole New Testament, whole Old Testament that talks about a lot of his attributes that sometimes aren't actually brought up.
Mm-hmm.
Some stuff that can be, I wouldn't say taboo. It's just not as popular to talk about. But that basically there's a whole swath of things with God that he surprises you with how multidimensional he is with all of his different attributes. And so obviously while what he did on the cross is extremely important, there are other attributes about his that I can see that you would also be proclaiming besides I guess just sticking to he died on the cross. Here's who he is. He humbled himself. He died on the cross to save us from our sins. Would it just be that, or would it also be, and here's these other things about him? That would actually also help to show I think would also maybe give a little more highlight to that.
I would agree with that because it is describing more of him, and that part of his excellency is I'm trying to think of the right words how to say it, because you have been called out of darkness into his marvelous light. Because you are now in his marvelous light. You see all those excellencies. You see all those astounding things that he's done. Creation, his will, what he desires of man. And you see all those because you've been called out of the darkness in your previous life. So you are to call it out to non-believers of all these wondrous things.
Right. So part of it that I would see is that there are things that seem like they are contradictions would be the wrong word, but that they are very different attributes that he has. There's things where he's supposed to be peaceful. There's other situations where he's willing to fight. And you combine all that stuff. I mean, those are just two things. There's a number of things where they seem to be pretty different, and yet they are all combined. He shows you that he embodies them all, and so and then you, I think, in different points at least in the Old Testament, see where it's exercised or where he's acted on those, and so it could be something that surprises people, but it's also like, okay, so he's all these things. Ooh. On top of, what he did on the cross. This person him on the cross, he also did all these other things. And so he's mind-boggling, basically.
Well, I think, for it's also the part where in verse 10 where he goes, once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you have not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And that's, for me, more the idea of, evangelism. Because there is excellency, there is the wonder of the mystery of God, and that why would he do this? Why would he step into humanity to come save us? Like, we'd be like, there's love, such, and there's also a lot more mystery right there.
Mm-hmm.
And for it's an excellency. We can see that excellency. We can see that more clearly as Christians. There's still like that excellency of the mystery. Excellency and the mystery at the same time, because we don't know everything right there. But even so, what we do know, and that's marvelous, and how that has changed us and how Jesus has come into the world to save us, that we are to proclaim that so that other people can be the chosen race, the royal priesthood, the holy nation, people of his own possessions, to be God's people, to have received mercy.
So, I mean, I definitely think it is that. I just think that because they're making it out like it's multiple things, because they say excellency. It's not like an excellency. It's excellency. It's like there's like multiple things. As if, I guess to me, the gospel aspect would be the excellency of what he has done. But because it's like, it looks more like plural, it's as if, here's all the different things he has done. Mm-hmm. And we have all of the Old Testament and the New and stuff in the Gospels to show here's what he has done. So essentially, make sure you talk about all of it, and it's very important to stick to the gospel, but make sure you tell all of it, because it's just like he's that immense.
Yeah. For viewers, this will probably be a part where next episode will begin, because to make it a bit shorter, this will be have coming up next is 1 Peter 2:13 through 25.
Do you want to cover 11 and 12?
This will be the next part for go between 1 Peter 2:11 to 25. And so that'll be the next episode.